today I'm going to share with you my grief and loss journey um, due to my grandmother's death. Now, this death is fairly recent, as in just about a month. From 3 days from now, it'll be a year. But it definitely has been a journey that's been difficult for me and difficult for my family. So I thought I would reach out and help you all. So I should start with the beginning. No, not the beginning of time. That's a story for another day. But my grandfather, Jerry Nelson, he was my best friend from the day I was born. He would always say that every time he would see me, like, we've been best buddies ever since you were born. And I definitely believe that because my whole life I remember just us being so close. I would always run up to him, whether I was going to see him or he was coming to see me. There'd also be lots of hugs, lots of spending time together, lots of reading together, even though at first I couldn't read. And then there was me always trying to be center of his attention, even when we would go to church, and because he was the senior pastor for so many years, there'd be people talking with him, and he'd be carrying me on his shoulders. I'd ride on his shoulders a lot. Um, he never did that with my siblings because he got too old by the time they were born. But he would always carry me on his shoulders when I was little. I would always sit on his lap for family pictures, as we took one every year. And there's actually a picture of me for the family pictures. And if you look at my earliest ones, even though I'm sitting on my grandma's lap, I am not happy about the picture. I'm so mad. Probably like 4 years old, and I'm like, ugh, everyone here looking at me needs to stop. It's hilarious because every time I see that picture, I'm like, I am so not happy. And it's funny. Um, but we were also very alike. I would always follow him around in the church. I'd always help him home in church. And he was really my safe zone. I could talk to him about anything, regardless of what it was, even if it was something ridiculous as something he didn't understand. Like, for example, I am a huge fan of, like, certain movie franchises and Harry Potter. He didn't understand that, but I would always be talking to him about it, and he'd be like, "Oh, that's so cool, honey. Tell me more about it." But he'd also be like, "Oh, don't know how you remember all those names." But I love you for it, honey, and it was always so much fun. And whenever he couldn't remember a name, I'd always help him out with it. And because of both of our love for creative writing, as the reason why I'm actually a writer is because he was a writer. I wasn't a writer at first. I was just a storyteller, as we would tell stories together all the time. But I would always love sharing my creative talent with him, as we would, every time I was over there, for as long as I can remember, we would sit down, we would tell a story. I can't remember them all because we told so many. My sister says he actually wrote them down. Haven't found them yet, but I would come up with all these names and characters and plot lines that he just loved. But he also wrote a ton of stuff. He wrote sermons every week for so long, and whenever I had writer's block, I'd be like, "Papa, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what I'm going to do." So he would always help me with writer's block and be like, "Take a break, tell me what you're writing." And then, okay, I'll take a break. And it always worked. It was the best advice. And really, that sort of comfort that I had with him is not something that I really had with any other person. Not to say I didn't have comfort like that in my life from my parents or from my friends, because I did. I definitely have close friends that I trust 100%. I trust my parents with my life, and I trust my siblings. But the amount of trust that I had with him, it felt like he definitely was a pillar of my life because we did so much together. Everything I did was not just based on him or dedicated to him. It was because of the person that he was, how kind he was, how he reached out to people. And every time I saw that, I wanted to be exactly like that. I wanted to reach out to people. I wanted to help people. Because all I've ever wanted to do my whole life is help people. And he's the reason why, because he was always helping people. It didn't matter if it was his best friend or a close stranger. He would help someone at 24/7, and I wanted to do that. And with his creative talents, even though mine were a little bit different, he would always say that the best way to express your thoughts and feelings is through writing them down. And so that's what I do throughout my stories, is I write everything down, and getting all my feelings out really helps. And my first book, actually, I published October of last year. I dedicated it to him. He always said that he was going to read it whenever I told him about it. Unfortunately, he never lived to see it. But I dedicated it to him because he was, like I said, a pillar of my life, my best friend. And when he died, that kind of vulnerableness that I felt without him being there is kind of beyond words. Suddenly, I felt alone whenever I was walking by myself. I felt like any time in the world I could easily just be taken out, because that's what happened with him. Even though he was a very healthy in the beginning, he kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and they didn't know what was wrong. And every time we thought he was getting better, because there were many false alarms we had with him, and they're like, he's gonna be okay. We figured out what's wrong, and he would be fine. But the one time where we all thought, oh, he's gonna be fine, was the one time he wasn't fine. And that feeling of not being able to have that comfort that I had with him really set me into kind of a dark place. The grief that I felt, it definitely, it wasn't an ambiguous loss after his death, but it definitely was before then, because during the time he was sick, he wasn't the same. He would often say things to me like, he would say someone hit him when he was in the rehab center, because he was always falling because his legs were so swollen, and he wanted to be independent. And we all had to tell him, you can't be independent, you're falling, you're at fall risk, you need to stay in the nursing home. And he didn't want to, so he'd complain about it. And seeing him like that was just traumatizing for me, because I had never seen him lose his temper with anyone. I had never seen him straight up say, oh, someone hit me and I want them to be fired right away. And when people got the full story, they're like, well, was this person black? I don't see skin color. Is what he would say, because he didn't want to seem racist. But seeing him in that way was so different for me, because I knew he wasn't the same. Because I knew the papa that I knew, that I was so close with, the one that would take me out to the lake, was always picking raspberries with me, would always spoil me with chocolate, even when I hadn't had dinner yet, much disapproval of my parents, would never ever do that. He would never say that he wanted someone to get in trouble for what they did. He would never complain about having to take his medicine. He would never complain that he was just lonely or about the world, and that he just wanted to go, because that's what he kept saying towards the end of his days. Where's the die button? I'm so tired of this. I don't want my medicine. I don't want it. And he argued a lot with his doctors, with my uncle, who took such good care of him. And it was so hard to, even though I didn't see it every day, it was so hard to see him like that. And it definitely felt like he was changing. And that ambiguous loss still sticks with me to this very day. I still feel kind of the loss that I felt, because even though we were still talking, and he never forgot who I was, forgot who anyone around him was, he just wasn't acting the same. He just acted stubborn and difficult to take care of, because he didn't want to be taken care of. He wanted to take care of himself when really he couldn't take care of himself. And because of all the close calls we had with him, there was sometimes just days where I would just lay in bed and I'd be like, what's going to happen when he does go? What's everyone going to do? What am I going to do? because I always wondered what would happen to me when he was gone, because I didn't like to think about that. But I always wondered what will happen when he goes. What will happen to me? Will I become so sad that I become a different person? Because I already knew that grief could do that to a person. I had seen so many examples of it. And even though the first two losses I had, like when I lost my grandma when I was in high school, right before my senior year, before I graduated, I was really sad, but I wasn't angry because I knew she was sick. I knew she was dying because she had leukemia. So I knew at any point she could go. But my grandfather, we didn't know what he had. He just kept getting sicker and sicker. Then he would get better. Then he would get sick again. And then he'd get better. And then he'd get sick again. Until he got so sick. And then he would recover. And to the point where we actually didn't know. We had no idea if he was going to recover, because towards the end of his life, we were pretty sure he was going blind because of all the hallucinations he was having and whatever sickness he had, because I never figured out what it was. His legs were just so swollen, he couldn't walk. He was always falling, waking up in the middle of the night, and he would have hallucinations of demons, people trying to kill him when he was on his medicine. It was horrible. They never figured out what it was. And in January, about 2 days before he passed away, on January 6th, and my feud that had happened between my uncle and my mom seemed to finally end, as he called my mom and said, I just talked with Dad, it sounds like he's dying. And I called him, and the last words he ever said to me were the words he always said to me whenever we talk on the phone. He would say, I love you so much. He said, I love you so much. Don't forget. And all I can remember doing on that phone call is just the sound of my heart breaking inside my chest as I cried and said, I don't want you to go. I want you to stay. Because I did want him to stay. I didn't want him to go. I never wanted him to go. I was just about to graduate from college, and I wanted him to be there to see it. Even if he wasn't healthy enough, I still wanted him to be there because I knew how much he wanted to be there too. And there were so many things that I wanted to do with him, even though a part of me knew that he probably wouldn't be there. I wanted him to meet my friends from college. I wanted him to see me get married, see me have my own kids, start my own family. But that's not possible now. And even though there was a part of me that always knew it wasn't possible, there was a larger part of me that hoped it always was possible. Because that's what I wanted. And that loss that I had and the grief that I felt was definitely a void of so many different emotions. I was angry at the world for taking him away, but I let it out during the night where I would cry. There were many nights, even when we were at the funeral, where I'd cry buckets of tears. My mom would hear me, and I'd be like, I'm fine. And I would just deny the fact that I was hurting so much, because I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to feel sad. I wanted him to just say it's okay. And when I try to talk about it with people, like the myth of closure says, closure does not make you feel better. Closure makes you feel worse. Because people would talk about it, they're like, let's talk about it. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. No one understands what I'm going through. People can be like, well, I've lost my grandfather too, but you don't understand what he meant to me. He meant to me more than just an average grandparent. Most people think when a grandparent dies, they were just old. And yes, he was old, but he was so much more than just an old man. He was a pillar of my life, my best friend in the whole world, and someone I didn't ever want to lose. because we were so much alike. We were always connected, joined at the hip. And I never wanted to lose that because I felt safe and loved when I was around him. And after he was gone, I felt like I would always be alone. I would always be lonely. I'd always feel scared because no one could understand. And especially like at night, the night is where it was the worst for me. There was one morning where my own thoughts like really scared me, and it was a Friday morning. I was in a relationship with a guy who wasn't the best, as my grief definitely did kind of cloud my judgment. I was really desperate to feel loved, so I went a little bit on a dating craze. And even though people told me you shouldn't be dating, you're not really in any shape to be dating, I wanted to date. I wanted to feel better. So I did, but this guy, even though he was nice, he never hurt me, he didn't respect my boundaries. And he was depressed all the time, so I felt depressed all the time. And one morning, it was close to my grandfather's birthday, I woke up and I cried because I had just had a fight with my best friend the previous day, and even though we made up, I was so sad and vulnerable. I felt like my mental health was deteriorating and I felt like I was depressed. I didn't want to do anything. And there's been a brief moment because I have a dagger in my room. I thought about using it to harm myself. And looking back, I'm so surprised that my own thoughts could even go there. And I'm so glad I didn't do it because I talked with my parents about how I was feeling and they helped me feel better. And I didn't mention how extreme it was because I knew I would never be able to actually do it. But coming out of that very dark place was very hard for me. It affected my personal relationships, affected my decisions, and it was a journey that I'm still going through to this day. Even though I've improved so much, I still look back at my previous choices and wonder, what was I thinking? Why did I start that fight? Why did I say that thing? Why did I get into that relationship? Why did I feel so alone? And the why questions just keep going. And while I've answered most of them, I'm still looking for answers. There will always be the question of why. But we need to feel grief. Grief is important because what is grief if not love persevering? If I didn't love my grandfather as much as I do, I still love him very much to this day. The grief that I have felt wouldn't be this extreme. Even though it's hurt me so much, I'm so glad that the memories I have of him are all still with me, and I know I will never forget them. Going through that grief process, and I've ultimately accepted at this point that there is no 5 stages of grief. Like, there is no, denial, bargaining, depression. That is all things you actually go through when you are dying. And I've also accepted at this point that you don't overcome grief, you learn to live with it as time goes on. And I definitely have. And the best thing that I did while I was grieving was something I actually hadn't done before, but I really am enjoying it, and that is painting. It sounds silly to some people maybe, but experiencing how I felt through my art, through writing, and just so many paintings that I have all over my room, it just really became a calming kind of gesture for me. When I was painting, I could not think about how sad I was. I could get all my feelings out. I was not letting all my emotions onto someone who really didn't deserve it. I wasn't being angry. I wasn't crying in front of anyone. I could just be myself, and I could paint all those pictures and say that these were a way that I could still connect with him. And it really does work. I do still paint to this day, and it's such a common gesture. And I actually wrote a poem for him back my senior year of college, that's when he passed away. I wrote a poem for him and my grandma that I didn't get to read at the funeral, but it was a very beautiful poem that I so supportive of my artistic talents, and he always said to me, "You're gonna do great things. I know you will." And I think just remembering all that and connecting on that with him, because he was that way too, has really just helped me realize just how much alike we are. Even though he's still not here physically, he is still with me spiritually. As every time I write a book, he's there. Every time I paint a picture, he's there. Every time I go to church, he's there. And anytime I preach, he's there. Because I just gave my first sermon the other day. It was a crowd favorite. And even as I continue through my journey here at Luther, I know that he's still there. For everyone upstairs, I say jokingly, but definitely it was that kind of thing where everyone upstairs worked through him to get me on the right path, and that's what happened with him. And I definitely don't feel bad about saying that. I love you, Papa. I always will.